Thank you for coming. My name is Haifeng Qian. I'm the school director of Planning and Public Affairs. On behalf of our faculty, staff, and students, I want to welcome you, especially alumni and friends, to join us in this event. And it's a beautiful day outside, so it's great to come back to Iowa City. Some of you I know travel very far from California, some other places. Really glad to have you here. Of course, we're here to celebrate sixth anniversary of the school. It's kind of a milestone for us, of course. And I also want to take this opportunity to just celebrate generally public service. And it's kind of a tough environment, I would say, for public service in recent months, if you're not recent years. I think our work, most of us are in the public service area. I think our work generally are underappreciated, but we should give more credit to ourselves, right? Public service to me is really a kind of honorable way of life, and I would just quote a former president, George H.W. Bush, and public service is a noble calling, so we should be really proud of ourselves about what we're doing in contributing to the common good of the society. So why don't we give ourselves a round of applause? So it's really good to see everybody, and I have a brief presentation before we get into our two panels. So I'll start with a brief history about the school. I'll just say that the school is older than me, and there's a lot of things I don't know about what happened for most time of the school's history. So the school was started sort of in 1964, when a program in urban regional planning proposal was approved by the Board of Regents. In the following year, 1965, we started to admit the first cohort of students. I don't know what happened in between, like 1965 to 2010. I'm sure a lot of things happened, but at least I do not see a major name change. 2010, by the way, is the year when I got a PhD, although I joined the school 4 years later. What I know is 2010, the school was renamed from Graduate Program in Urban Regional Planning to School of Urban Regional Planning. To my best understanding, it kind of reflects our expanded scope of work, both in education and in community outreach. There may be some other reasons. Chuck Connolly wouldn't know. I don't see him here yet, and he may join us later for the reception. But it's kind of a name change that make a difference to us. 2010, we made another name change from School of Urban Regional Planning to School of Planning and Public Affairs. This reflects the new degree we added in 2020. That is a Master of Public Affairs program. It's kind of a natural transition to us because for a long time, we have been a public policy or public affairs program already. So now we kind of offer two flagship degrees, one in urban planning, the other in public affairs. We also have two minors. Just want to make you aware that there's a demand among UI undergraduate students to study cities or to study public policy in general. So we're very happy to kind of meet that demand as well. So now it's the time we think about next 10 years. So we'll be here 60 years, generally serve the students, the general public, and Iowa communities very well. We're in the process of strategic planning, and I want to thank everybody. Many of you here in this room have provided input for us. We're in the process of finalizing the strategic plan, and that will guide us for the next 10 years. So I'm very excited about that. We'll keep our alums informed about that. So for this kind of gathering, I think it's a time for, especially for alums, to think about the good old days. I'm gonna have to show you some pictures or things from our archive that make you kind of think about old days and when you were here. I cannot meet. I don't know. I know this you graduated from different years, but some of the pictures may not be consistent with when you were here, but just show something at least think about this, again, this good old days. And this picture, I know it's very difficult to tell, it's a group of pictures together, but it's kind of a show. I honestly don't know anybody on this slide, but again, some of our other professors, retired professors, will know them well. To my best guess, the founding school director or department chair, Jim Harris, is somewhere in the middle there. I know you really cannot see this, but if you look at the bottom line I can share the slides if you want. You see the classic congestion toll model that everybody should know if you take the economics class or transportation economics class. So I look at the archives and see this like a newsletter. This is the urban planning newsletter published, the first volume published in 1980, January. I know you cannot see the words there, but it's just sort of important to show you this. I want to mention 1980 is also another major things happened. That is when the year I was born. And by the way, I was born on April 11th, 1980, so I took the liberty as a department chair to schedule this event on today. So I got a big birthday party here. So, thank you. So I know this. You can't read this, of course, but it's just something I want to fun facts about this. And at that moment, Dave Falkenbrock was the department chair. One thing really amazed me, was that he was assistant professor as a acting department chair. It's something just unimaginable these days, just given how much work the department chair typically has. I don't know if there's any names familiar to you. If you can tell. You can read this. There's 1980s, the time sort of the school finished the transition from physical planning to more like a social science public policy debate. So you see like 3 of our professors then like have a PhD in economics. I do want to specifically highlight one faculty member has a joint appointment with cultural engineering. That's Jim Stoner, who's sitting on the first row. He's a 1972 alumni, a graduate of this program, and went on to pursue a PhD in Northwestern and was a faculty in Iowa for a long time and have a joint appointment with our school here. This is kind of this alumni updates from that first issue of the newsletter. Started tracking alumni. Again, I'm not quite sure you know any of these names, but thanks to technology and also the work of Jenny Bell, our career service and alumni relationship coordinator, we are actually able to connect to many of these alums on this listed on this page. I particularly want to mention Bob Becker, a 1971 graduate. He cannot attend this event today, but was able to meet him last November in New Orleans, and he was a long-time supporter of this program and served on the advisory board since the board was created. So the next slide is still about alumni updates. Again, through technology, we are able to connect with some of these alumni on the list. I also want to mention Richard Gerson, alum of graduate from 1979, also a big supporter of the program. There's a very interesting page if you look at the right side. If you cannot read the title, it's called Bureau of Missing Persons. And also, interestingly, they were missing as of 1980, but we were able to get connected with them today. Again, thanks to the technology, and I was in email communication with a couple of people on this list. So it's kind of an interesting fact from this first issue of newsletters there. I was not able to get anything about our celebration of the 10th anniversary, the 20th or 30th, but I did see some pictures from the 40th anniversary. There was a gathering of alumni, faculty, students in the drafting room. For information, alumni, we're still in the same building, same space, although we do plan to move to the new art building. Well, it's the old art building, but with a renovation next summer. You probably can recognize some people here, including of course, some faculty. Chuck would know more people than I do, of course. Chuck is there. Just recognize our department chair, former department chair. Next slide. It's about our 50-year anniversary, which of course was 10 years ago. Chuck organized an amazing event then. That was my first year in Iowa. Just very impressed with our interactions and connections with our alumni. Among many other amazing things Chuck did was hiring me as assistant professor, and the picture on the right is the cohort of students graduate in 2015. I typically do not say like one cohort of students is better than another cohort. I do want to mention that this was the first cohort of students welcomed me to in Iowa. I sort of feel the Iowa nice from this group, and today I still keep in touch with quite a few on this picture, including today one of our panelists, Kirk, is sitting right there. There's a couple professors on the picture, and also met a few of them in the National APA meeting last week. Of course, we have a great gathering in 2015, and Dean Keller and our students and our alumni there. I also want to recognize our faculty who had served in this department for at least 10 years. I'm not quite sure this is the entire list. They are currently retired or have moved to a different university, or some of them have deceased. How many people on this slide you can recognize? 5? So, yeah, I met them in person, probably half of them, I would say. Again, our faculty who are here for a longer time surely know more people than I do. I do want to recognize Chuck is sitting right there, former department chair, and Jim Throckmorton is our retired professor and former city mayor of Iowa City. And John Fuller, he probably is the longest serving professor in this department, to my best knowledge, and he signed up for the event. Maybe we'll meet him later in the reception. Lucy Lauren just left the department a couple of years ago, but was in this program for a long time. And the former department chair, Dave Falkenbrook, Alan Peters, Peter Fisher, Heather McDonald, and of course the founding department chair, Jim Harris. Today we still have a scholarship named after him. So. Our current faculty, just want to also recognize our current faculty. If you're a current faculty here, raise your hand, please. Yeah, I want to say I have an amazing group of colleagues here. We're a little bit different compared with even just 10 years ago with the new degrees, but we not that different in the sense of we were policy focused. We have been policy focused all the time. So I also specifically recognize 4 on this page that also served in this department for over 10 years. That's Jerry Anthony, somewhere there. Scott Spack, and Feng Wen, and of course myself. I've been here for, this is my 11th year in Iowa City. There's also 2 alumni on this slide, including Bo Capacilla and Travis Cross, and we're very glad to bring them back in different capacities. Also, I want to recognize our amazing new faculty, Sarah Hoffmeyer, Sam Zalke, Sabrina Harris, and our professor of practice, Carrie Schupels, cannot make it today, but if you read the news last year about Native American policy, she has been like in the national media, all the places. So I'm very fortunate to have a group of very collegial and highly recognized faculty colleagues. I don't have a slide, I apologize for that, but I also want to recognize our staff, very hardworking, running this department. Abby Castle, Jenny Bell, and where's Jenny McCord? Okay, she might be downstairs welcoming our guests there. I want to mention our program. For most of you know, we do a lot of work for community engagement, and a big part of this was done by students. So I'll just recognize some of our work here. I was trying to get Jim Schwab's capstone project, but I just couldn't find it. I don't know whether there was one then, but the earliest one I could find was the one by Gary Goodwin. It's a 1986 capstone project, study Iowa City housing stock. And on the right is a study. I don't exactly know the scope of the report, but I want to highlight one of the team members. Carla Schrader is here with us, and she will be on a panelist after my brief, not so brief introduction here. There's fast forward in 10 years. We have 2 projects here, Cedar River Resource Assessment, and I want to highlight one of the team members, Eric Tyson. So Eric will be also our panel right after this. And the one on the right side is another capstone project in the same year. I want to highlight one of the team members too, which is Mike Norris, who is sitting right there. Mike served as the chair of the URP advisory board for 10 years and make a huge contribution to this department for consistently. So very appreciate your help to the school, Mike. So 2015, we have the Sioux City Neighborhood Housing Study. Kirk Lehman is one of the team members, will be joining us on the panel. And on the right side is our recent MPA capstone projects. And I want to mention the name of Cami Rasmussen, who's sitting right there. It's going to be our panel as well. So we're really a student-centered program, even for our community engagement projects. Our faculty do separate projects, but it's really our students at the forefront of serving Iowa communities. So I'm closing up my talk here. So just a brief reminder of our schedule today. We're kind of 5 or 6 minutes behind our schedule. So after this, we will have an alumni panel talk about their experience and the impacts of SPPA on their career. And we're going to have a coffee break afterwards. And the second part of the second panel for the afternoon is the showcase of student projects. We have 3 amazing groups. They're going to talk about their recent projects. And at 5 o'clock, we're going to have a reception. Dean Amanda Tan will join us at that point. So without further ado, I think we're going to switch to the alumni panel. We've got 6 panelists graduated from 6 different decades. So it's really, I feel really fortunate to get this amazing group of alumni coming back. So I'm going to invite you all to the stage here. So we'll probably sit by the decades of graduates. So Jim probably want to be here. And then where do you want me? Here. Think about which decade you graduate.
That's an old.
I think this is going to be my moderator's chair. So let's just go the how it's going to be a center seat. Zero.
What bed is yours?
That's what I'm going to sit here. So. Please pass this. I think we have a separate. Do we have a separate microphone here? Can you hear me now? Okay. I can use this one. So I'm going to pass this one to you, Jim.
Okay.
All right, I got 5 questions, and I've got 6 panelists. So each panelist is going to have 2 minutes. If somebody can watch the time, that would be very helpful. So my first question, can you generally just introduce yourself and tell us your career path?
Okay. Well, I came to the department after serving 4 years as a naval officer and living in Hawaii, and I flew to Iowa City in January, which shows you that I wasn't too smart, and ended up, just walked by Jessup Hall, saw the urban planning sign and said, that looks interesting. And I went in and signed up and consequently graduated 4 years later. My master's thesis was on doing the mass transit technical study for Iowa City, coming up with the route structures and fare structure, and actually then helping the city implement the bus system, which set me up pretty well to go on to Northwestern to get a doctorate in engineering. And then I worked for a couple of consultants in Chicago, and then got a phone call and wanted to know if I wanted to come back here and stand in for a departing faculty member in engineering for 1 year. And that 1 year continued on to 37 years. I did escape quite a bit. I worked in London several summers for the Department of Environment and the Department of Transportation. I worked in Washington, D.C. for a congressman 1 summer, spent several months in the Middle East on a USAID lecture tour, and then came back here and sort of worked with Dave Forkenbrock a lot at the Public Policy Center. And one of our projects, we worked with the Center for Computer-Aided Design in Engineering, and I got put in charge of the driving simulator project, and which was really interesting. It involved acquiring about $20 million worth of hardware, and I think at the peak we had 30 full-time PNS and graduate students working, and the intent was to go ahead and try and win the national award for the Advanced Driving Simulator, which is now out at Coralville. So obviously we won, and after we won, I just sort of settled back and into being the aging faculty member. But I helped a lot of graduate students start their own companies and helped them along with their careers. And then finally I had some health problems and went into an extended phased retirement and fully retired in 2013. Did I go over?
Yeah. Of course, I want to highlight again. Jim was had a joint appointment with Urban Regional Planning.
Hi, Jim Schwab. I'm going to tell you two things for starters. One was that one thing that framed my career was that in addition to urban planning, I had a second master's here in journalism. So I took longer than most people to get through here. But second thing is that nothing that I did here directly prepared me to anticipate what I really ended up doing. Because short story, 1993, I'm asked by Bill Klein, then the director of research at the American Planning Association, to take over a project that he had negotiated with FEMA on post-disaster recovery. Knew nothing about the topic. But I did know a lot about environmental planning, which was close enough as far as he was concerned, because there weren't a whole lot of people who were experts in disaster planning at that time. The result, without going into great detail, was that by 1998 we had produced what APA calls a PAS report, Planning Advisory Service report, 356 pages long on planning for post-disaster recovery and reconstruction. And when it was released, the joke in FEMA staff at the release party was that Jim had a vertical learning curve. Believe me, they were pretty close to the truth. But the interesting thing was that it put me at the ground floor of an emerging subfield that's come to be known as hazards planning, which most planners really hadn't even contemplated or were not aware of way back in 30 years ago when I started this. I continued along that line, but the thing that really blew the field wide open was known as Hurricane Katrina in 2005, which blasted New Orleans. You couldn't believe if you had seen it, mile after mile of devastation. It introduced to the public climate change and other factors that, including the lack of good land use planning in that instance, that had impacts on what happened. Thanks to climate change and a lot of other factors, including where we choose to develop, the hits kept coming. And the topic stayed on the front pages, and we kind of know where, how this thing has evolved. By 2008, Iowa was the subject of disaster because of the 2008 floods. And at that point, the school here recruited me to teach a course. They decided maybe we need some curriculum on this subject. And so for the last 16 years, I have taught a course called Planning for Disaster Mitigation and Recovery. Other factors, by 2010, as a result of work after Hurricane Katrina, I negotiated work with FEMA on a report on integrating hazard mitigation throughout the local planning process. That had its own impact. It is ongoing, has long-term ramifications. When that was done, I was negotiating another report, which was an update of the 1998 thing called Planning for Post-Disaster Recovery Next Generation. We got involved in Hurricane Sandy, and so we had major experience from that to ground test what we were doing. And finally, by 2017, I left APA, and they threw a big retirement party at which I announced that I was going into alleged retirement, as I refer to it. Became a one-person consulting firm, was promptly elected chair of the Hazard Mitigation and Disaster Recovery Division of APA. And anyway, on it goes to 2025, and at this point, I'm retreating from a lot of that because I, turned 75, and I thought, time for, anyway, I've got a literary agent in New York who wants me to do a professional memoir about my experiences, and so that's what I'm working on now. So there we are. I don't know how close I stayed to 2 minutes.
I probably 5 minutes, my best guess, but that's fine. Yeah, I'm sure there's some of the audience here are your students, were students in planning disaster classes. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Haifeng, I would like you to take this out of my 2 minutes because I just want to take Haifeng the opportunity, to thank him for the opportunity to participate in this exciting celebration of the school's 60th anniversary. Thanks a lot. And I'm delighted to be here. And I'm actually an economist by training. And when I already moved to Iowa because I was married, I came to the University of Iowa in 1990. I thought, let me take some courses in economics. And I did one course, and it was so abstract, vague, real numbering system. I decided this is not what I want to do here at the university. Then the urban and regional planning program came to my attention, and I'm delighted to be part of this. And 1991 to 93, I was a student here, did my master's in urban planning. Now the MPA program is different, the public policy one. And I did a thesis option with Peter Fisher and Alan Peters. And Peter Fisher and Alan, I think they are not, Alan is not here, but Peter Fisher, I'm not sure if he's here, but he strongly discouraged me from doing this. Kala, how important is it for you to do a thesis? And do you really want to do this? And I insisted, and I think because of my persistence with him on this, they included a new course in the catalog saying that thesis, right? I looked up the University of Iowa catalog before I came into this panel, and I did notice there continues to be a thesis option. So that became the basis for my academic career. So I would call myself an academic now, and I did a thesis, and with which I think they were also very happy. I was also quite excited, and I went on to do my PhD in public policy and management from Ohio State. And then following that, I was an economist at the National Association of Home Builders in Washington, D.C. for a year, following which I went back to India. I went back to India, and I was an academic there, and I've been teaching, and I was an assistant professor to begin with at the Indian Institute of Management in Lucknow, in a place called Lucknow, in the most populous state of India, called Uttar Pradesh. And then after which, I was in Delhi at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, and I was in Delhi for nearly 5 years, following which we moved to Bangalore, and there I was a Ford Public Affairs Fellow at Public Affairs Center, and then following which I moved to the place where I am currently a professor at. This is the Institute for Social and Economic Change. It's called ISEC, and it has partially funding from the Government of India and the Government of Karnataka, where Bangalore is located. And after that, I have traveled much more internationally than I did when I was in the US. So I've done a lot of work for the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, and I was telling Haifeng this morning when I met him that I've been to China about 10 times now, right? Various parts of China. I've been fascinated, and to the Manila, Philippines, and to Latin America, Bogota, Colombia, Brasilia, to the World Bank conferences, to Washington, D.C. last year. And I've had a Fulbright Fellowship at UCLA twice in 2021 and 22. And last couple of years, last year, I became affiliated as an honorary fellow to Stanford University Center for South Asia. And this year, I'm on sabbatical, and I'm affiliated as a visiting fellow with Stanford University Center for South Asia. And I've written about 10 books, all on urban and regional issues, but I will talk about the impact the program has had on my career and my life a bit later, but I think I've exhausted the 2 minutes. Thanks a lot for this opportunity again.
Thank you. I feel I have a little more short path since my time here at the planning program. I graduated in 2003. I was undergrad at UNI in chemistry and biology, and met one of my roommates who was a planner north of Chicago, and just fascinated me and really got me into looking into that, and applied here. Unfortunately, was accepted here. And since graduating in 2003, I accepted a position at the City of Burlington, followed Mike Norris down to Burlington, fellow graduate together. But accepted a position as associate planner with the City of Burlington, moved up to city planner and planning director, and then community development director, and now community development and parks and recreation director. So kind of have that all inclusive title and experience there, but a very short line. I've stayed with the City of Burlington, really enjoyed the practical experience that the planning program offered, and using that on a day-to-day basis through working with zoning board, planning commission, historic preservation commission, trail grants, all that kind of practical experience that I get to really see in that smaller community on a daily basis, the impact of my work. So I've had that shorter line since graduating here, but I've really enjoyed the time there and really enjoyed having that experience in a community that size where you can really see the impacts of your work.
Thank you. Kirk Lehman, Assistant City Manager for Iowa City. I feel the same way hearing their illustrative careers, and here I am 10 years later out of graduating with my master's. So my path was mostly through the liberal arts. I was studying anthropology at Luther College, and I had a professor who advised me, you know, anthro is a terrible career choice, so you should really look at a professional-based career. And so I looked at museum science, I looked at urban planning, and I looked at library science, and urban planning is the only one that had any interest to me. And ever since that time, I really haven't looked back. I love planning. Got my master's in 2015, focused especially on housing and community development. And then I went to Simcoe and was community and economic development planner for a year out of Sioux City. And then moved to the dark side and joined RDG Planning and Design for a year and a half out of Kansas City and Omaha, and then ended up coming back to Iowa City. And then just kind of noodled my way through different departments in Iowa City. So community planning, community development, where I was mostly doing federal grants, and then I did long-range planning with our urban planning division. And most recently, I've shifted into the city manager's office. So it's been a much shorter career, but noodling around and still finding my way, so.
Thank you, Kirk. I'm Cammie Rasmussen. First of all, feel so privileged to share this panel with these esteemed professionals. My path is probably not as exciting. I'm the city administrator in Solon, which is just up the road here. It's a town of about 3,500. And my time there began in 1998 when I was hired as the part-time city treasurer. And I wanted to work in a small town because I grew up in a small town, and I like the idea of knowing who my neighbors are. I like knowing who my kids' friends' parents are. I like that small town feel. So I thought, you know, working in a small town is really what I would enjoy. And so that then led me to the city clerk's position a few years later. And then a few years later, I decided I wanted to stay home and have a few kids. So then I decided to run for city council because I just really liked being involved in my community. A few years later, I was elected to the mayor position and served that role for a few years when the city council said, hey, you know, we need to fill our city administrator position. Would you be interested? And I said no, actually, several times, but ultimately I knew it would be something I'd be very good at, and I knew it would be something I would enjoy. And I learned over the way that it really doesn't matter the title. I love being part of the community where I live and raise my family. So not 37 years later, but 11 years later, I'm still the city administrator. I'm also the public works director. I have a dual title. And so, you know, I'm a graduate of the 2022 class, which was the first cohort when MPA kind of was revived. And I'll be glad to share more about that story soon.
I'm sure Cammie had opportunities to get a degree from another university, but she was waiting us to start an MPA degree to pursue it. We really appreciate that, Cami. So my second question will probably just go that direction. Cami will be answer this first. So it's still not too long ago for you, at least. My second question is, what did the program, the school look like when you were enrolled? And tell us like one or two things that you were most impressed with.
Well, the cohort in 2020, when I started, was 12 people. And so we had the opportunity to really get to know each other. We were a tight-knit group. It was also COVID. So that first year, most of our, all of our classes, quite frankly, were online. So the first year, we really never met in person. I hadn't met an instructor, and I hadn't met any of my fellow students because of COVID. So year 2 was really quite impactful because then we got to go in person, and so that was just a whole different dynamic. I feel like because of that, I really had 2 different experiences. You know, the impact the program has had on me is I was already an employed city administrator and working full-time in the profession when I decided to apply for this program. And so for me, the impact was truly that. I imagined in March of 2020, as I started hearing about COVID, I imagined the Marvel movie. I imagined, you know, half of the population no longer here on the other side. That's what I imagined in my mind. And I thought, if I'm lucky enough to be one that's still here, then the impact that I leave on this world is even more significant. And so I decided that I'd heard Chuck been coming to all of our city administrator conferences telling us about this program, and I knew I needed to be part of it.
Well, my experience was a little more traditional college experience where we were in person the whole time, 2013 to 2015. At that time, we were the School of Urban and Regional Planning, so it was very focused on the planning policy aspect of it. I think our cohort was just north of 20 people. Again, really tight-knit. You really get to know people in the trenches when you're taking all the same classes, and many of you don't have backgrounds in planning. And that was really what a lot of us came from. I feel like everyone finds their own way into planning, and almost none of it is, I know that I want to be an urban planner. It's someone mentions it, or you see a show about it. I don't know. There's all sorts of ways you get into it, but none of it's direct. So when you're really slurping down the fire hose of land use law and planning practice, you learn a lot, and you learn a lot together and how to rely on each other. So the impact that it has really had on me is that it made my career possible. I mean, I always was public service minded, but I never really had a focus for it until I went to this school and realized this is what I want to do and this is what I'm going to do, and it taught me the skills to be able to do it and to do it in a competent professional manner, and it made my career possible. So I would say basically all of my professional career is completely reliant on this program and an outcome of it. So for that, I will forever be appreciative.
I'd say I had a similar experience to yours. We had a smaller class in ours. I think a lot of them were dual enrolled in law or public health and different things. So we had a small actual graduating class of the planning program, but me coming from the outside, there were some that had graduated undergrad from Iowa. It was nice to have that kind of community, that family in the drafting room, and having that space where you could go and just have community and talk to each other and learn from each other and rely on each other. I think it was a great thing. So obviously had a great impact on my life going into planning directly and still being in the field 21 years later. Still enjoy it, still love to see the impact in our community, on our neighbors, on our families, and having that great experience here really set me up for that. So yeah, it was a great experience. I loved just coming from a program where I guess you didn't have that kind of community or that family into a family here for those couple of years that I was here, so.
So Haifeng, I think you're asking us what the program looked like when we joined and some things that we were impressed with.
And what you most impressed with, since other panelists also mentioned the impact of the program,
Okay.
feel free to add that part as well.
Okay, okay, also, okay, because I don't want to be repetitive later, so I thought I'll just clarify. Okay, I think what I was really impressed with about the URP, as it was called then, is that it had a very interdisciplinary perspectives of both practitioner and a theoretical oriented program. So it was a very nice combination of theory and practice. That is the first thing I really liked about the program because the theory part was given by, I'm delighted to see Jim Throckmorton. I mean, he taught us planning theory and the history of planning thought, and Oscar Niemeyer and Le Corbusier. And it was really so exciting, the Columbian exposition and so forth. And now the other part was also very, very practice oriented. I was delighted. Haifeng put up the project report we did on the potential of sales. That was for Heather's class on field problems in planning, for which we looked at data from the county business patterns on a sample of college towns throughout the US. And we tried to understand whether the students have a different spending pattern, like food and restaurants and things like that on retail, compared to other towns where there were older populations. So I'm delighted to be reminded of that project. So that was one very interesting combination of theory and practice that I loved about the program. Now, the second part is, the program is named as Urban and Regional Planning. But what I loved about this was that I also got a lot of perspectives about labor economics. Alan taught this class. That was really wonderful. It evinced my interest in reservation wages, net benefit from jobs, how you can target tax incentives to make that a positive sum game and so forth. So this combination, a multidisciplinary perspective of urban with labor economics, also I enjoyed a lot. So that is to answer the first part of your question. The other part, the impact that URP has had on my life and career. I mean, this is this is best shown rather than spoken, because this URP program created my love for cities, right? I love cities. I love the people in cities. And I mean, not to say anything about the people in villages, no, but I love cities, right? This URP has had a very, very big role in making me the urban person that I am known for today. So I think that is the biggest impact URP has had on my life and career. I really thank URP for shaping my perspectives towards cities the way in which it has done. Thank you.
I want to mention that Carla has a forthcoming book by Oxford University Press in a few months, and it's about Indian cities. I don't mind you promote your book here as long as you give credits to the school in your book.
That's called Indian Cities or Suburbs, Trends and Causes of Suburbanization in India. That's my 11th book out of Oxford University Press. And all my 10 books earlier have been on cities or regional issues, right? So that is another thing this program did so well. Integrate cities with regional planning, right? So you look at it in a slightly broader perspective. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm going to offset my first long remarks by being very brief here. One thing very different when I was here, 1982 to 85, from today, there were no PCs. There were no laptops. They were just coming out then. So everything I learned, almost everything I learned about computers, I learned in my professional life, not here, because we didn't have them. But one thing they did have was some very good faculty who were fun people to learn from. And David Forkenbrock, John Fuller, Mike Sheehan, you know, they could have high expectations in their classes, but they could also be great fun to work with. The one thing, impact, I think, was very simply the opportunity to be creative and to think creatively. And I think from my first comments, you can figure out what the impact of that was. So,
Well, I think in 1970, things were different. I think Jim Harris thought we would be more of a physical planning program. So that's the reason you ended up with this huge drafting room full of drafting tables and stuff. They thought we'd work in there with T-squares and triangles all the time. But that quickly evolved into very much of a policy analysis and program curriculum. The curriculum probably wasn't much different than what you have now. Content's obviously significantly updated. But, you know, we all had to learn how to use mainframe computers to do a statistical analysis. We had to learn to program in Fortran and PL1. But otherwise, in terms of the other content, it was very good, very broad. And for me, it made it, once I did the master's program, I had to have 72 credit hours to graduate and do a master's thesis. It made doing a PhD at Northwestern a piece of cake. So the interesting thing was sort of the broad background it gave everybody, because within 10 years of graduation, most people had moved up quite rapidly. I think there was a real vacuum of people who had that broad a background. Doug Wright was Deputy Secretary of Transportation under President Carter. John Mazziotti was the Assistant Secretary of Transportation. Todd McNamara was Chief of Staff to a very senior congressman, and he was later Lieutenant Governor of Tennessee. Doug Wright was later Deputy Mayor of San Francisco. Bob Becker was a department head in New Orleans. Bob Baker was a department head and planning director in Minneapolis. Roland Burke was director of housing for the city of Boston, and then shortly became executive vice president of John Hancock Insurance Company. Kay Callahan was a senior advisor to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So, I mean, that indicates, and there were others, and I noticed a lot of others, that people moved up. Maybe they were typically a city planner for 3 or 4 years, but quickly moved up into a position of national prominence, which I think is something, most people don't even know about it. I mean, it was interesting times. Not like now, but it was interesting.
Well, I was trying to say that's very encouraging words for our current students who start to look for jobs. And it's a little bit tough environment, but I feel like our students, we still remain a very tough program, I would say, in terms of the credit hours, the technical skills, and some of our current students probably can speak for that. And we're hoping, of course, to prepare our students well for their job market. Yeah, thank you. So my next question, the first, well, you can either answer one of these two. If you want to be a little bit more political, you can skip the first one. But the first one is, who was your favorite professor when you were in the program? And the second one, you can just answer, again, one of the two. What was your favorite class when you were here?
Oh, it was probably Ken Duker, because he took the transportation planning class and sort of guided me through the masters, but they were all quite good. Amazingly, one of the most valuable courses was the land use law class, because we had to take a full semester of just land use law, and it's something I've used in a lot of different aspects of life. A lot of that became pretty valuable.
We still have a very comprehensive land use law taught by Jerry and Jean. Thank you.
I would have to, as far as a favorite professor, I would have to credit Mike Sheehan simply because he was the one who persuaded me to come here in the first place. I had considered something else, ran into an interview having to do with public administration and so on, that I was hit with the comment that some practical experience that I'd had in lobbying in Des Moines in a previous job would not be applicable, but if I had done a study of lobbying, that would be more relevant. And I just started shaking my head over lunch with Mike, and he said, why don't you apply to the planning program? We love people like you. So I did, and the fact that he was teaching the environmental courses, which was also one of my favorite things, certainly my favorite course, reinforces that. So that basically is it, except I re-emphasize those environmental courses. I never heard the words floodplain, hazards, disaster. That all came later, but that's okay because I loved what I was studying. One other thing, very quickly though, my favorite professor in terms of non-course work had to be John Fuller, who took me under his wings when he was running the Institute of Urban and Regional Research, and particularly unleashed me to do a LEAGUE study. LEAGUE was the Legislative Extended Assistance Group back then, which did reports for the Iowa legislature, which were typically done by four-year faculty, or faculty at four-year colleges and universities in Iowa. Somehow John engineered for this humble grad student to do a report in 1984-85 on the farm credit crisis, on the grounds that he's also a journalism student and he can write plain English, which somehow let me have that when there's a whole College of Agriculture over at Iowa State. That was a remarkable experience.
I just want to add that Jim mentioned there's no like a disaster in this environmental courses, and Jim was by many recognized one of the founding father of the field of disaster planning mitigation. And if you want to say a few more words about that, we'll be happy to hear.
Just very well. So back one of the fun things for any planner in the U.S. is to be inducted into the College of Fellows of AICP, which happened to me in 2016. And they always read a 100-word statement about what your impact on the planning profession was, and they did, in fact, credit me with providing the pivotal work in creation of the subfield of hazards planning, which is kind of humbling thing to hear up on stage. So, yeah.
Yeah, Haifeng, thanks for asking us this question about our favorite professor. I mean, Jim Throgmorton's class was very good. He's here, the history of planning thought, so that one. And Cheryl Content's class was very good. She used to teach us this course on statistics for policy analysis, I think. And we were all very young and trying to understand how to distinguish one thing from the other. And she used to tell us so articulately that how do you know how much is big enough, right? When you want to show one thing is statistically different or significantly different from zero, right? That coefficient. So I really liked that class a lot. And Alan's class on local economic development policy and regional tools and techniques, that was really great, because I must have mentioned this as the impact of the program on my career, but you won't believe this, I use these tools even today, and they have become part of my standard toolkit on tools and techniques of urban and regional research. The shift share analysis, the location quotients that I have learned, so that has become part of my regular social science research methodology toolkit, so to say. So I published a paper on calculating location quotients and shift share analysis for all of India cities in the Review of Urban and Regional Development Studies, which is until today one of the most downloaded in the journal's history. So that is one thing I wanted to say. And Peter Fisher's class was also very good. Microeconomics for policy analysis one. And I was also the teaching assistant for this class. So I learned a lot, grading student assignments, and I also learned a lot. And was that the only thing that you, and one other thing I wanted to mention about Alan's class on local economic development policy. This was great. And he used this 1991 book by Tim Bartik on who benefits from state and local economic development policies. And this continues to be one of the books I use for my students. So it's really a very, very great book in which he talks about reservation wages and all that. And I really enjoyed Alan's class on the same. Thank you.
You seem to mention a lot of good classes. I will ask this different way. What was a bad class for you? You don't have.
Actually, field problems in planning. That was very good in terms of my learning, but we were actually making presentations, and we used to get commented upon saying, no, don't bend your body so much while speaking, and things like that. So those vibes were not very good, but I really liked all the classes.
We still teach field problem in planning, although we now call it sustainable community labs. I think with students have similar, some students have similar perceptions, complaints about the project, but they often, after years of practice, they feel that's the courses that help them most, if not there for the first job, but for their practice in long term. So yeah, we're still offering that, and actually all our faculty are involved in that class, so I have to say it's a really good class now. So.
We had some great professors while I was here. I'd probably point out Jerry Anthony. I had a good connection with Jerry, was able to work with him as a research assistant, and just seeing his passion for the field and the work ethic that he had. And then even after the fact at planning conferences and being able to have conversations and talk to him about different things going on. So really appreciate that. And for me, as mentioned, the land use planning and law, just the basics of planning, getting into the field, practice of local government planning, just those basic planning courses that I use every day in my field. So had a lot of great classes, environmental impact analysis, some other just really neat classes, but I'd say those core classes really helped me to where I'm at today and use every day.
I won't name a favorite professor, but I was focused on community and housing, community development and housing, and so I had lots of great classes with Jerry Anthony. I especially loved land use planning law and practice. That was one of the best classes just because it lays such a firm foundation, and in terms of, for me at least, the notes that I took from that class when getting my AICP and studying for that exam, my notes were great to have on hand because those are the things that you need to know. I will.
How did you keep up with him? He spoke so fast and so bringing through higher notes. I couldn't keep up with my notes.
Well, you do your best, and then you just crowdsource with other people. That's how you do it. And then I will also call out my neighborhood planning class that I had with Chuck. We were really lucky in that we got to work with Davenport on a neighborhood plan, and similar to field problems, it was basically a proto-field problems class because of that. And so that and my field problems, the field problems was tough, but the skills that you learn as part of that are really crucial, and the connections that you make while you do those sorts of classes are also just very important. And in terms of favorite professor outside of the classroom, I will say Haifeng was the most fun since it was his first year when I was there, so that's what I'll say.
Thank you. I would also just suggest that give a round of applause to Jerry and Chuck and Jim, which name just mentioned, and as excellent professors, give the students excellent experience there. So.
Let's see. Well, I just have to say the whole experience was amazing. I don't have a favorite professor because I felt so supported throughout the entire program. From the first time I reached out to Chuck and said, I think I need to do this, till the day I stood on the stage and received that diploma, I just felt truly supported. So, it's different when you have a professor online versus a professor in person. But that first year, Ashley Monroe, she was working with the city of Iowa City at the time, and her class really spoke to me because I was there because I was trying to become a better leader. I knew how to be a manager. I knew how to do the job. I knew how to do things, but I wanted to be a better leader. And a lot of that class was looking at different leadership styles, and she introduced us to a lot of people from all over the country, and it was a good experience, and it gave me some real concrete and tangible examples and experience to help me sort out what kind of leader I wanted to be and become. Another one of my favorite days was with Travis Krause in our placemaking class when he traipsed us all over Iowa City, and we looked at paintings, murals, we looked at all kinds of things that without that class I would have never had a lens for. I would have drove through cities without looking for those things, and I wouldn't have known how to bring those same things to my community. So those are some of my highlights.
Great, thank you. I honestly don't know how we are doing time-wise, but I have a last question. If we finish early, we can probably take some questions even. I just don't know. Okay, so my last question is about the future of the school. I would like to have your input. What do you hope the school to become or achieve for the next 10 years? And what are recommendations for us to achieve that? Thanks.
All right, I'll start. To be part of, to be an Iowa Hawkeye is one of the proudest things that gets to come out of my mouth. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a grandma, I'm a city administrator, but being an Iowa Hawkeye is something that is so dear to my heart and I'm so proud of. And so this institution and what has happened here for 60 years, and to hear what this school has done for so many people on this stage and coming up with the future cohorts, very proud. I'm so proud to be a part of it. And I'm here today because I often tell Haifeng, if there's anything I can do to help promote this program, I'm here. Because I think our responsibility as graduates and as alumni is to ensure the future of this program, because in this program is the future. As we see all the political divide, it takes a finesse to rise above that. It takes a finesse to be better than the rhetoric. It takes a finesse to lead with courage and lead with passion and lead with integrity. That's why this program is important.
Very well said. I think for me, a lot of it is nurturing that next wave of planners and now just public servants more generally. I think that's what's really important about the program, to foster that love of community, to foster just the next wave of public servants that we get. It's always so much fun to be around Iowa, and then you realize that you all went to the same program and you have kind of a similar experience. A lot of the curriculum's the same. You have the field problems, both love and pain for it, and that's what I really think is important about the program, and just wanting to see that continue and to continue to grow. And like I said, it's always challenging for people to find their way into the profession. So I think for me, the thing that I would really like to see the program do is continue to build awareness of the profession, why it's important, what it is, and how you can get involved in it. Even if you're not going to go get a master's program, maybe you're just a member of the community that is invested as someone who's an elected official or a board member. Just getting people involved and aware, I think, is a big piece of it.
Yeah, I'd echo that. Just being at undergrad at UNI, I had no idea this program existed. I had no idea what planning was until I met a parent of a roommate that did the practice, and now doing it, I think a lot of people in our community don't realize what impact the planners have in our community. They just take it for granted that things are designed or set up or happen in certain ways. So just spreading that awareness is a big thing here at Iowa, but also outside of the university to other programs around the state and around the region is a big thing to keep this sustainable. And yeah, I think that's a big thing, and just continue to collaborate with different practices and programs. That's a great thing to see that crossover between planning and different other areas of specialization and practices at the University of Iowa. I think that collaboration really strengthens this program as well. In the real world, working with all these different, you're not just isolated, you're working with all these different individuals, groups, and programs. So I think that collaboration and just, yeah, as I mentioned, getting the word out of the importance of planning and what the impact has on communities is important.
So now, as Haifeng has fantastically put together this panel with one alum from each decade, I've graduated 3 decades ago, more than 3 decades ago from this program. So I think the time is ripe now for the program to start a PhD program, because we continue to be in masters, right? So I think if we can have a PhD program, I think that will be great. And one way, I think one important way in which that can be done is to continue to have the thesis option in the course catalog, 1. 2, actually I forgot to say one thing, one paper out of my master's thesis was nominated as one of 3 finalists for the Charles Taibu Prize in Regional Science by the Western Regional Science Association. I noted that Haifeng has won this prize, the Charles Taibu Prize. I looked at his profile. So, and Cheryl Content, she was the director of the program at that time, and she offered me financial support to travel to Tucson, Arizona, to present this paper in that meeting, WRSA meeting. So I think it would be great. I don't know, maybe there is some fund now for students, master's students, but if you can have a fund for master's and PhD students to do research, have this thesis, maybe integrate that with this field problems class, no matter how tough it is, but you can encourage this research culture so that a strong doctoral program here, I think, will really be very good as the way forward, I think. If you have any questions, you can ask me, but I don't want to take more time. Thank you.
Thank you.
It won't surprise you to hear me say that I think we need to maintain a focus on sustainability and resilience in planning in the face of any resistance to those ideas. Why? Because this is about the future viability of our cities, our communities, and our society, which is a central purpose of planning. As to the resistance, I will just say that this political phase too shall pass, because nature does not care what we think about climate change. Reality is what it is. We should follow the science, not the politics, because our future depends on it. And, you know, if you go to if it's still up there, the webpage for NOAA that deals with billion-dollar disasters, you will see that they are increasing year by year. And if we are not increasing our ability to prepare for that sort of thing, that's sort of a bit insane. In the middle of all this, I'm going to close by just saying we need to maintain a focus on the human face of this problem in planning. Diversity and equity are not bad things, but very positive endeavors for engaging some of the most marginalized people in the planning process, particularly when everything is at stake. So I'm going to close by giving you a little quote from my own closing keynote speech in 2007. at the University of New Orleans, in New Orleans. This is not long after Hurricane Katrina. It was a conference on Carlos evacuation, by the way. And I said, perhaps we can finally infuse into our communities. Let me preface that. I went a little religious on these people because it's New Orleans, and it's not long after Hurricane Katrina, and I felt like, A, you got to buck up their spirits, and B, you need to provide a little inspiration. So, part of my closing paragraph of my closing keynote was, perhaps we can finally infuse into our communities and their elected leaders a desire to start planning as if every desperate face in a natural disaster is the face of God, but we must not wait until disaster strikes to activate that sentiment.
Well, I guess I'd say what all these guys said and go along with that. I think it's an important thing to maintain contact with your graduates from previous years and use them to the best of your ability in order to help your current graduates. I'll tell a story. I was somewhere north of Urban, Jordan, and decided to go for a walk all by myself. And I'm walking along this dirt road, and suddenly a black Honda is approaching me at a pretty high rate of speed, and the driver stares at me when he goes by and then does a power 180 U-turn, comes right back towards me, and I say, oh great, now I'm going to be kidnapped. And the driver sticks his arm out the window and yells, "Go Hawks." So, I mean, it was a former student, so so it's probably a good idea to maintain some contact.
All right, thank you. Do we have time for any question? No, okay. Okay, let's just probably take one question from the students. If you don't mind, I'll just go probably run 5 minutes beyond our scheduled time. And do you have a question from the students for the panel? I don't want to put it on the... Or if you... What's that? Okay, if your students do not want to take this opportunity...
So, Mr. Schwab, being that your specialty is environmentalism, do you see, I know that you see huge changes in our climate since 1985, since you graduated. Do you sense more immediacy in solving the problems? Like, what is the difference in how you look at it today than how you looked at it when you graduated?
Huge is the simple answer to that question. In 1985, the subject was just surfacing, you know, in the political discourse and public discussion. I think it was like 1988 when Dr. Hansen testified in front of Congress about global warming and you know, put that forward as a congressional priority. And then, of course, we had Al Gore championing that in the 90s and into the 2000s, and still being ridiculed 20 years ago over his movie about, you know, what was it, An Inconvenient Truth. But, you know, facts have a habit of piling up and piling up and piling up, and the research has piled up. And I've lost track of how many books and reports I've read on this subject. And so I think there's a high level of awareness, and I don't think that the political or other viability of maintaining a stance of denial is long-lived. It just won't work because of, you know, it will not be long before the next disaster happens. And it's not just you know, it's obviously a worldwide phenomenon. I am a strong believer in the idea that truth matters.
Thank you.
And there's just more evidence than ever all the time.
Yeah, let's probably, we'll take one more question from our alumni.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Mary Grace. I graduated in 2011, I think, and I was born in 1985 when you graduated. I'll say first my question, and then I'll give you my context. My question is, what is the role of an urban planner or a policy, like a public affairs graduate, in the world and our communities, and especially now? Like, it's been alluded to that what's going on in the world at the hands of the U.S. is nuts. Like, I think that's not debatable, but I'd be happy to debate it if anybody wants to. And I'm asking because after I graduated from here, in urban and regional planning, surviving the fire hose of land use planning and law and field problems, and in Burlington, actually. And other things, I went on to work for local government in Connecticut, which is where I went to high school. It's not as random as it sounds. I grew up in Chicago, which is why Iowa was familiar. People in Connecticut can't tell you where Iowa is. They think it's the one by Idaho, by Montana. I'm like, well, no, it's another one. Starts with an I, has lots of vowels. I worked for a redevelopment agency for 2 years, and I never drew a single plan. Like, I never made a plan, because that doesn't have to be the job of a planner, right? Like, I ran the CDBG program, which is a short acronym for the Community Development Block Grant Program. We did community development and affordable housing work. And basically, we were the favorite department to the city, even though we weren't really a department. We were a quasi-public entity, because we made them a ton of money. We had like a 1 square mile radius just around the downtown, and we took what was a deteriorated downtown, like Burlington kind of had, and made it like it's like rated one of the best cities in the U.S. recently. It's a 1-hour train ride into New York City, and it's awesome. It was a working waterfront, and now it's a mixed-use community. It's beautiful. And we made them a ton of money, and that was enough to like do a bunch of cool things, like a maritime aquarium and other stuff. And then I did that for 2 years, and then I was bored. So I wanted to travel. So I moved to Tanzania because I studied I'll be quicker, sorry. And I eventually got a job at the World Bank because it kind of only takes privilege, which you have as a white American, to get a job at the World Bank in another country. And I knew GIS because I did urban planning here, and so I was useful. And I did that for the next 10 years. And so, like Professor Schwab, you are the godfather of disaster risk management and resilience, and like that's now the top priority of the World Bank around the world. And it matters, like the work that you do matters. And I've been wondering kind of since I graduated, like where are the urban planners in this world? Like we have the skill set to fix the things. We have the mindset to like stand up for the people who are the disenfranchised. Are we doing it? Could we be?
I'll ask you, our panelists, to answer a long question with a very short sentence. Who want to take the lead?
Thank you. Thank you for this very interesting question. And I think for the United States, planning is needed only to train graduates and to think about cities and regions methodically. But I'm comparing this with India. In India, there is no planning that happens. Actually, there is a lot of master planning that happens, but nobody follows them except to violate them. But now, they're increasingly realizing the need for more and more urban planners to train a future generation of professionals who are trained in urban and regional planning. So I think there's a very, very important role for programs like this to play in developing countries like India, and also in the United States, where the market seems to have a say in most of the things. But even for planning the environment, conserving natural resources, to relate it to the earlier question the gentleman, the student asked, I think it's very important for the US to include disaster planning, environmental conservation, promote the use of public transport, and reduce wastage of natural resources. But I'm glad you asked this. Thanks.
Any other panelists have one sentence answer to this quick, long question? Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of planners who are out there doing that work and that they just don't call themselves planners.
Yeah.
That's what I think, based on my experience, because I'm always shocked at the amount of people who are like, oh yeah, I have an urban planning background. It's like, oh, well, I would have never thought that, but here you are, I guess. And I think a lot of the work of planning folks is local, and so it doesn't rise to the national stage, but you see it, especially in home rule communities. I mean, planners are essential to getting a lot of the stuff done in Burlington and Solon and Iowa City.
This is very short, but it's a bit of shameless promotion. But if any of you are signed up for the virtual National Planning Conference of APA on April 25th, 2:30 Central Time, is the premiere in a session discussing communicating disaster resilience through film. The premiere of a documentary film that I've been working on with a whole bunch of people from the Hazard Division of APA, titled Planning to Turn the Tide. So we will be working on more segments. This is an initial segment being shown, but you will see people in that film who are doing exactly the job that you're asking about.
All right, thank you. Let's give a round of applause to the panelists. And thank you very much for the first session here. So we probably just have a 23 minutes of a coffee break instead. So we'll come back at 3:50, and we got three amazing student teams going to present their projects. So 3:50. Coffee, I think, is downstairs. If you need to go use the restroom, it's in the basement. So thank you.